Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Minato betrayed Kushina, and she falls in love with Naruto, part 1. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. I do not own this fanfic, and also make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, the Red Abyss, and support him for writing this awesome fanfic. Link is in the description. So let's get into the video. Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze summoned the sealing platform to seal the Kyuubi in his newborn son Naruto. His wife Kushina Uzumaki, who kept them in control using her chakra chains, was looking at her husband with eyes full of pain and betrayal. She had believed that he loved her more than anything, but just a moment ago he had made it clear that the village is more important to him than anything else. She knew Minato loved the village, but she didn't know that he would sacrifice his son's life for it. From Minato's words, it was clear that Naruto would be used as a weapon for the village, the same thing she hated with her very being. She wanted to stop that misdeed from being done, but she was too weak, and she was also holding the Kyuubi back. From the look on Kyuubi's face, she could tell he was angry, and if she loosens her hold on Kyuubi for even a moment, the monster will kill her son. She didn't care about anyone at the moment. They all could go to hell for all she cared. But she cared for her son, but still couldn't stop it from happening. Every moment was like someone was tearing at her heart when she saw Kyuubi being pulled into the sea by her beloved son. She came to reality when she heard her son's wails. She dragged her body to her son's crying form. Every wail and sons coming from Naruto was just killing her. She knew he was in pain from the sealing. Even after being the Uzumaki, a little pain was like an after effect of sealing. She lifted her baby in her arms, and embraced his frail form to her bosom, and cooed, "Mom is here Naruto, everything is going to be alright." And, as if he understood her words, his crying reduced to sobs, and he clutched his mom's hair tightly. Kushina giggled, "My son likes my hair," she cooed, and the baby smiled. But that little moment of happiness with her baby boy cut short when suddenly someone yanked her baby away from her hands, and she felt like someone tore her heart away from her body. She met with the eyes of Danzo, who was holding her son. Her eyes turned to her son when he started crying. She narrowed her eyes. "Danzo gave me my son back," and she snarled. Danzo smirked. "This child is a Konoha weapon, and it's Konoha property. I will mold him into an amazing and strongest weapon," he said. Then his smirk disappeared, and narrowed his eyes. "And if you dare to stop me or try to do something foolish, I would kill you right now," he said. And, as he turned to go, the golden chain stopped his path. He stopped, and turned to Kushina, amusing. "I wonder if your son will have these chains," he said, and signaled his two red anibis to kill Kushina, and they lunged at her. Hiruzen and other shinobis were still on their way to the location. Several civilians were also going to the location of Kyuubi sealing. Hiruzen had already known what Minato had planned. After all, Minato discussed it with Hiruzen. Hiruzen was surprised to know that Minato would sacrifice his newborn child. He was happy inside that Konoha would get a weapon, but it made him uneasy when Minato said to Hiruzen that his son must be seen as a hero who saved the village. Hiruzen chuckled at Yondaime's naivety. There was no way villagers would treat Naruto as a hero, when it would come to their knowledge that Kyuubi is sealed in Naruto. When Hiruzen reached the location, he saw that Danzo was holding Naruto, and one root was dead on the ground, and the other was panting heavily. Kushina was glaring at the remaining, and she was in the worst state she could ever be. Kushina was on one of her knees. She was breathing heavily. Blood was pouring out from her arms and legs from several gashes that she took from the first. Her clothes were tattered. Her face was painted in her own blood, which was flowing from a wound on her head. Her body was trembling from the tiredness and exhaustion. Her eyes were opening and closing, indicating that she was fighting unconsciousness. Her chains were already on the verge of totally vanishing. Only one out of several remained in existence. Hiruzen couldn't believe his eyes. Even after giving birth just 2 hours ago, even after crossing the limits of exhaustion, even after being so bruised and wounded severely, she was fighting. She really was a true shinobi, woman, and a mother. The second remaining root lunged at her with his sword in an attempt to strike her neck, but in the nick of time, she blocked it with her chain, but the chain cracked and was ready to vanish. The root smirked behind his mask and pushed more. Without wasting any moment, Kushina pierced his skull, and then fell down on the ground with a thud, as her chain disappeared, which showed that she didn't have any ounce of chakra left in her. She tried to stand up on trembling legs. "Give me back my son," she said, as loud as she could, but it came out as a whimper due to her passing the limits of exhaustion. Suddenly her eyes widened when she felt something warm on her stomach, and a stinging feeling on her stomach. She looked down, and saw that a sword was sticking out of her stomach, and blood was pouring out from the spot where the blade had pierced. She again lifted her head, and her tired violet eyes again met with Danzo's. She blinked, and slowly turned to look at the owner of the sword. Her eyes widened to their limits, and her breath hitched for a second, when she recognized the face of the one who stabbed her. The person was a teenage boy of age not more than 13 years, but the most shocking thing for her was that he was a member of her genin team. Other two members of her genin team were standing behind the one holding the sword. Minato had given her a genin team when he saw her giving tips to Itachi. He thought her talent would go to waste like this, so he provided her a genin team. They were good kids. She never expected that it would be her genin team to whom she had trained. What were they doing here? Didn't they go to shelter in a safe house like everyone else? She gazed at the boy for some seconds, then narrowed her eyes, and lifted her head, only to see that everyone was standing there, Hokage, with all jounins, chunins, and some clan heads like Hiashi, and with their wives. Everyone was there. She recognized Mikoto standing there, behind her husband Fugaku, with a blank look on her face. The boy retracted his sword back from her stomach, and she stumbled backwards. Everyone was there, her friends, her well-wishers, her comrades, everyone. Then she narrowed her eyes, and noticed that not everyone was there. Anko, Yugao, Tsun, and some others were not in them. Were they hiding somewhere, or they were not here because they were on a mission? Then she remembered Anko's visit to her home when she was about to go on a mission, but what about Yugao and Tsun? She looked at Hokage, who was standing there with a look of triumph which showed that he won something. She wanted to chuckle, but couldn't. She didn't even have the strength to chuckle anymore. Her instincts were always right, and that's why she was always suspicious of everyone in Konoha. But what you could do, when you had to live with those people forever, you would come to trust them eventually. Ignoring the wound in her gut, she turned towards the person who was holding her son, and because she was unable to speak, she lifted both of her hands, and stretched them outward in front of her, in a pleading way to give her son back to her. But a trickle of blood escaped from the corners of her dried lips, when someone pierced her again in the stomach, then retracted the sword back, and again stabbed her, and kicked her in the back, which made her lean on one knee. Blood started to flow out of her wounds like a river. She fell down, losing all strength in her body and mind. Her breathing became slow, and long strides. She gazed at the sky. It was already dawn. She thought about her life. She lived a not-so-happy life. Her clan was destroyed, and it left a deep scar on her heart. But after coming to Konoha, after a certain incident, she fell in love with Minato, and then the scar started to heal slowly. She loved Minato deeply from her heart, but that same person betrayed her in the end, not only her husband, but her friends, and the whole Konoha. She had only one regret at the moment, and that was, she couldn't do anything for her son who had just come in this cruel world, some hours ago. She couldn't talk to him, couldn't see him growing up, she couldn't shower him with unconditional love, as she had wanted from the start, even before her baby came into the world. She turned her head, and looked at her baby boy. He had stopped crying, and now was looking at his mother. His lower lip had stretched outward, ready to cry again. His blue eyes were calming her, but alas, she will never be able to gaze in those eyes again. Then suddenly the distance started to grow between her son and her. The smile which she was showing to her son vanished, and her mind went into a frenzy. No, don't take him away from me. She wanted to yell at him, but words didn't come out. Tears had already started to pour from her eyes. No, give me back my son, give me back my son. You filthy human, give me back my son, Bothump. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Suddenly Kushina's breath hitched, and her body temperature started to rise. She felt like her body was melting from inside. Her eyes disappeared from her eyes, and soon after her pupils. Her violet eyes started to turn whitish with tints of red mixed in it. 2 white-red markings formed on her cheeks, starting from under her eyes, like an arc, to her chin. Red cracks appeared on her whole body, and they were shining, as if lava was filled in those cracks. The black and red shockwave erupted from her, and passed through all who were present there. A bone-chilling feeling of fear washed over the whole village, and its residents. Her hair became more like blood was flowing in the wind. She had red tints on her pale body. Her breasts became larger, and more alluring. Kushina slowly stood up. Everyone was watching her with white eyes, and sweat dripping from their pores. They were all surprised at what and how it was happening. Kushina's hands turned into blackish red scales, and her nails turned into large sharp claws. A 4 inches wide and 7 or 8 foot long tail emerged from the base of her spine. The tail had black color with red markings like cracks on it. And on closer inspection, one could see that the tail had scales too. In her legs were knee-high black scaly-looking boots. A red and black aura of energy, or was a chakra, surrounded her. Her height increased to 6.5 feet. The thing that remained unchanged was her tattered and torn clothes. A piece of her white tattered blouse was hanging from her breasts and supported on her right shoulder, and her tattered pants, which were now so short that it reached to only her upper thighs. It looked like a simple cloth was wrapped around her hips. After the transformation was completed, she opened her eyes. What is this? She thought, looking at her arms that had red cracks to the elbows, and then scaly claws in place of her fingers. This power, this feeling, it's amazing. I feel revived, and much more powerful than before. My wounds are all healed, she thought, and looked at the sky. It was morning with sun above the horizon. There was pin-drop silence in the area. Everyone had white eyes in shock and fear because Kushina was looking like a true demon now. My son muttered under her breath and looked towards the person holding her son. Kill that demon, Danzo shouted out in fear. Everyone lunged at her. They shot different kinds of attacks towards her like fire, lightning, water, earth. Kushina stood there calmly, without doing anything, just watching the attacks soaring towards her at a normal speed. When the attacks were about 10 feet away from her, an invisible barrier erupted from the ground and blocked all attacks. She motioned her tail, and sent it towards Danzo at blinding speeds, and wrapped it around her son, and retracted her tail back, and took her son back in her arms. Danzo couldn't comprehend what was happening. His eyes became wide seeing how fast she took her son back from his hands, and he couldn't even blink. As Naruto came in her arms back, she felt like her heart started to beat again, which had stopped beating, literally. She felt her heart leapt up in joy. She couldn't stop her tears from her pupil-less and iris-less eyes. She showered Naruto's face with butterfly kisses which made her baby boy smile, and squealed from the feeling of his mother's warm kisses. The assault of and continued in the form of different kinds of jutsus, but they were all being blocked by the invisible barrier. Danzo, enraged, rushed towards Kushina, but, as he came in contact with the barrier, an electric shock ran through his body, and threw him several feet back, and blue sparks ran through the barrier. Seeing this, everyone started to take their steps back in fear. Hokage moved towards the barrier. He too was nervous, and tints of fear had already originated in him, but he wouldn't show fear in front of his people, but he was sweating profusely. Hiruzen lifted his hand, and touched the barrier with his index finger, and, as Danzo, he also felt an electric shock run through his body, and his whole body became numb. He stumbled several steps back on wobbling legs. Then Joins and cousins threw weapons like shurikens, and some even threw wind and fire enhanced to the barrier, but, as they touched the barrier, their weapons, shurikens, and swords, all burned and melted in front of their eyes like wax. "You damn whore, you showed your true colors. You monster, I will kill you, and that demon son of yours, and free this village," Danzo shouted in anger. Hearing him, the people present there got their courage back a little, and they also started to shout. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi. Kakashi tried to use his lightning, and see if it did anything, Hokage said to Kakashi in a stammering voice. He was still trembling a little from the earlier electric shock. Kakashi nodded, and activated his Chidori, and ran towards the barrier which was visible now in transparent blue color. Kakashi threw his Chidori to the barrier, but his eyes widened when he saw that the barrier attracted his Chidori like they were opposite sides of a magnet, and the barrier absorbed his Chidori. He stumbled backward in shock. "I think we first need to know what this barrier is," Danzo said to Hiruzen. Hiruzen nodded. "Yeah, but how could it be this strong? Nothing is working against it, and moreover what the hell Kushina changed into? She looks like a real demon," Hiruzen said, looking towards Kushina who now has turned her back to all of them. So they didn't know what she was doing. Kushina was content while she was breastfeeding her son. It was a second amazing feeling after being a mother. She thanked God for giving her this opportunity to breastfeed her son for the second time. Suddenly she sensed someone behind her. How did they penetrate the barrier, she thought, and turned to look who it was. And when she saw a man emerging from the ground, she narrowed her eyes. "Oh, Earth user." Now, it was the time to punish them for what they did. While breastfeeding her son, several red chains, with black wisps coming out of them, emerged from her back, and before the man could even come out of the ground completely, a red chain pierced his brains, and splattered the brain matter on the ground. Everyone became horrified from the sight. "Well, let me make it easy for you," Kushina said, and closed her eyes for a second, and, as she opened her eyes, the barrier disappeared, just like that. Kushina looked at the crowd of villagers, and Shinobis. "The barrier has been disappeared," she smirked, showing her large and sharp fangs. "So, come on, strike me," she said, and looked at Hokage and Danzo. "But I am warning you, if you love your life then go back, and I will not kill you. But if you don't love your life and family then come," she said, stretching her free hand outward. Then using her index finger she motioned them to attack her. For a minute everyone was silent. It was complete silence, only the chirping of birds interrupted the silence. Then with a cry, they all ran towards Kushina. Her smirk turned into fear, her chains became active, and she wrapped her tail around her, and Naruto for security measures. She saw that her 3 genins were in the front line, and seeing this she smirked like a predator. One of her chains went soaring towards the genin who was holding the sword, and had stabbed her earlier. The red chain stabbed a teenage boy in the left thigh. He stopped, and cried in pain. Second chain pierced his right thigh, then the third chair pierced his right shoulder, and then left. Then she lifted him in the air for everyone to see what she was going to do with him. A chain came near the boy's gut, and started to pierce his stomach at a slow pace. The boy cried out in agony, and writhed. "How does it feel to be stabbed in the gut, huh? Are you having fun?" "No, I guess, but that's the fate you chose," Kushina said, and another chain pierced him between his lungs. Then several chains pierced him, and tore his body to shreds, and his insides were thrown on the faces of his teammates. The other 2 genins became horrified, and started to retreat, but before they could retreat several chains pierced them. She sighed in sadness. It was not fun to kill kids, but they called it upon themselves, and there's an old saying, when the buffaloes fight, crops suffer. After killing her 3 students, she saw 2 to her right, and two chunins in front of her, and Hokage and Danzo to her right. She pierced the thighs of the 2 Anubis, and then severed their limbs, and threw them at the Hokage and Danzo. 4 chains erupted from the ground, and stabbed in the stomachs of Jounins, and they weren't even able to see the chains let alone dodge them. She took a step forward, and kept shredding the heads, legs, and arms of her opponents. She didn't care if it was a civilian or shinobi, both were responsible. The blood had started to pool on the ground, painting the ground red, and filled with limbs everywhere. Now everyone was panicking, and a stampede occurred. Kushina was dodging, blocking, and attacking at the same time in all directions using her chains. Suddenly someone threw a smoke screen, and smoke filled the area, but she could see their chakra like a Byakugan user, so she didn't stop her assault. Uchiha Fugaku casted a Jinjutsu, but she sent him in a Jinjutsu like Mangekyou Sharingan. Yamanaka tried to enter her mind, but a fierce look made them faint. Yamato tried to make a wood barrier around Kushina, but her chains shattered it like butter. Then Kushina saw a horde of bugs coming towards her. She smirked, her chains started to heat up, and they became so hot that they started to encase in the fire, and sent some of her chains in the horde of the bugs, and the chains started a dance of bug death, and just after 1 minute the field was clear of any bugs. She lifted her hand, and stretched her palm outward. Several fire dragons came out of her palm, and started to burn the whole area, the village, and soon after that a sky-high fire started to burn the village to smithereens. The fire became so fierce that it could be seen from miles away. The cries of pain and agony could be heard inside and outside of the village, and the greenery started to burn. People were running here and there to escape from the fire. The civilians who were at the location where the fight was going on had already run away to save their lives. Hokage and Danzo were just looking at their village wide-eyed. How did it turn out like this? It was such an easy and perfect plan. Then how did it happen? His whole village was burning down to ashes. Anubis, gather all water users and try to control the fire. Use any means to stop this fire now, Hiruzen shouted at his lungs. He turned to Kushina with rage in his eyes. You will pay for this, Kushina, Hiruzen growled, and made his way towards the village, but, as he moved one step several chains blocked Hiruzen and Danzo's path. Where do you think you are going? Kushina said calmly. Suddenly Kushina felt someone behind her, and turned to see who it was. The person was Kakashi, and a group of jounins, and they all came to her together. It only made her more excited to sever their limbs from their bodies. She retracted her chains, and attacked the group of shinobis, and in just a matter of seconds their limbs fell down on the ground, heads, and legs, and arms, their half-bodies which had been cut from the middle. Then suddenly she felt a little stinging sensation on her nipple. Naruto was sucking. Ah, Naruto, don't bite on it, she scolded her baby. And the baby gave a squeal in return, and a large smile, like he knew what was happening, and he was excited, and enjoying it. Kushina turned towards Kakashi, and found him missing. Ha, where did he go? She thought, and for a moment her eyes whitened, then narrowed when Kakashi emerged from the ground, and hit her from behind, but she blocked the attack with her chain at the last moment, and turned to look at him. Kakashi just pissed his pants literally when he saw the look of an enraged devil on her mentor's wife. Keikushi. Before he could complete the sentence, several chains pierced him in several places, but missed his heart, but Kushina didn't give it much attention. He would die from blood loss. She lifted him in the air. Blood was pouring from his wounds, and he vomited blood. Kushina threw him to the side like a ragdoll. Then she sent a powerful chakra at the Hokage monument, and narrowed her eyes. She made a shadow clone, and sent it to Chuck. You know what you have to do. I guess it's the masked man. If you get the chance, then kill him, Kushina said to her clone, and nodded. The clone vanished. The masked man was watching the sight from the monument, and he was sweating. It was like a calamity. It was more dangerous than whatever happened to Kushina. He was also trying to comprehend and understand, but couldn't. Suddenly he felt the same presence as the location of the fight behind him, and he turned to look at the person. He started to sweat more. How long was she standing there? I couldn't even sense her presence, he thought, and he saw her twitch, but before he could activate his kami, she grabbed the mask, and it shattered under her fingers in human pressure. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to identify the person. Who are you? She asked. Then she narrowed her eyes. You're the one who freed me, she said, and the chains emerged from the clone's back, and pointed towards the person. Suddenly her eyes became wide in realization when she recognized the person. You're Obito, she voiced in shock, and he decided it was the cue for him to retreat. He is then transported into another dimension using Kamui, by taking advantage of Kushina's momentary shock. Ah, Kamui, I will have to think something about it, she muttered, and dispelled. So it was Obito, original, Kushina muttered. She noticed that two rude Anubis were standing in front of him, but before they could move, she stretched her arm outward, moving her index finger sideways in a denial. She stopped them. TCH, don't you dare to touch my son, she growled, and two chains pierced their heads, and they fell down dead. She looked around, and noticed that no one was there anymore. She sighed, then her breath became slow, and she felt her consciousness fading. She activated the barrier immediately before anything could happen. Her tail disappeared, and her hairs changed back to their previous form. Her eyes turned to their violet color, and she became just like she was before. She fell down with Naruto still nursing on her breast, and the exhaustion didn't work on her, and she closed her eyes. Naruto kept nursing on her breast the whole time. Just how hungry a baby could be. It was only Naruto, or every baby is like that. Kushina thought with closed eyes, and then she became unconscious. After 5 hours in the afternoon, the village was destroyed. Nothing remained unharmed. Hokage was watching the burning village, standing on the collapsed Hokage building's debris. Every paper and document was burned. Nothing remained intact in the building. The howls of pain and the cries of agony were like hot melted iron in a Hokage's ears. He gritted his teeth in anger. He was going to have a weapon and become the strongest village again. Their plan was perfect, then how did it come to this? Danzo came beside him with other council members. How's the rescue operations coming along, Shikaku? Hiruzen asked with frustration. Shikaku looked at the demolished village. Our shinobi are working their sweats out to rescue as many people as we can. We were also trying to blow out the fire, Shikaku said, then looked at Hiruzen. Shikaku, Tsume, and Chaozu were the only clan heads who were absent when the fight between Kushina and everyone else was going on. What happened which made Kushina-san do this? Shikaku said, narrowing his eyes. I also would like to know that. What did you geezers do to make my cheerful friend do all this? Tsume said, somewhat growling. She was busy with civilians to escape them to the safe house, but when she caught the wind of what happened, leaving everything, she rushed to the location. Shikaku and Akamichi were also there, and the sight and the stench of blood and guts that was everywhere just made them vomit. There were limbs and bodies everywhere around Kushina. They tried to go to her, but the barrier stopped them. Their eyes widened when they saw Kushina. She was covered totally in blood and in the tattered clothes, and her child was sleeping atop her breasts. She had her arms wrapped around him protectively from any harm. Tsume couldn't stop her tears after seeing the sight. Nar and Akamichi were on good terms with Kushina. At the time they had only one thought in their mind, why, and what made you do that, Kushina? They knew she would never kill any innocent. It must have been something terrible that she couldn't take. So what happened? Chaozu asked. Danzo, Hiruzen, Kaharu, Himura, and some noble civilian members looked at each other. Hiruzen then sighed. We wanted her son Naruto to be a loyal weapon of Konoha, after Minato sealed Kyuubi in him, Hiruzen said, and Tsume, Shikaku, and Chozo widened their eyes. After pondering a little they understood why Minato did that. Then Tsume asked. She looked like she was going to cry when she heard that Kyuubi was sealed in Naruto. The child had just been born, and he was already condemned to such fate. We took her child from her, and he stopped and looked at Danzo. And what? Tsume shouted. We tried to kill Kushina, Danzo. The three widened their eyes. Tsume put her hands on mouth. It was needed because, if she had left alive, she never would have let her son turn into a weapon, and the emotions make a person weak. These useless emotions are not needed in a weapon. So we killed her, but we don't know what happened. She changed into some kind of creature or something, and it all happened, Danzo said. Tsume had tears in her eyes, and Shikaku and Chaozu were clenching their teeth in anger and disgust. How could you do that? Shikaku hissed through gritted teeth. You are not human. You are monsters in human disguise. I feel ashamed calling myself a Konoha Kunoichi, Tsume said growling, and ran to her home. Shikaku and Chaozu shook their heads in disappointment. We agreed with what Tsume said, and went to their homes. Tsume entered her home angrily, pushing the door so hard that it became loose hinges. Hana, she shouted. Hana, come here now, Tsume yelled to her lungs. Hana came running. She froze when she saw the furious look on her mother's face. Yes, Mom, she said meekly. Hana goes to Kushina's location now, and waits there, and when she wakes up, brings her here. And if anyone tries to stop you, treat them as nuisances, even Tsume said, and Hana nodded, but before going out she needed to calm her mother. She put a hand on Tsume's shoulder. Mom, I am going, but before that you need to calm down. It's not healthy for the baby, you know. You are about to give birth to my brother or sister, Hana said, and Tsume calmed down. Tsume's husband had died 7 months ago, 1 month after Tsume had conceived the child. Hana then immediately rushed out to Kushina's location. When Hana reached there, her mind went into dizziness from the rotten smell, and she almost fainted from it, but she composed herself and looked at Kushina. Her mom had warned her that there's a barrier around Kushina, so she will have to wait for her to wake up. It was hard for her to stay there, so she made a little distance between them, and decided to keep an eye from afar. What are your plans now? Danzo asked Hiruzen, who smirked evilly. If Kushina doesn't transform again, then I am sure we would be able to incapacitate her. Then separating her from her son would be effortless, and then she herself might be useful for us, Hiruzen said, and Danzo and everyone nodded, and went to their own devices. It had been 4 hours, and there was no sign of Kushina waking up. Naruto had also woken up, and now he was crying from the night, so Hana had made a small fire near Kushina's location. Tsume had also come there when Hana didn't return with Kushina. Both mother and daughter together were waiting for Kushina to wake up. On the whole, it had been 12 hours since the incident, and it was night now. Hokage had sent information to every shinobi who was out on missions, and ordered them to return as soon as possible. Kushina groaned, and she slowly opened her eyes. It was dark. It's night already. It seems a whole day has passed, and she heard Naruto's cries, and she immediately sat up and lifted Naruto in her arms, and started cooing. Naruto's face was red from crying, and he was snotting too. Oh my baby, Mama is sorry baby. You must be hungry. Is my boy hungry? She said lovingly, and pulled up her tattered blouse or whatever remained of it, and put her nipple in crying Naruto's mouth, and instantly, he stopped crying, as he found the appendage, and started to suckle on her nipple. She winced from the stinging feeling in her nipple when Naruto sucked a little harshly. In an attempt to satiate his hunger immediately, he bit on her nipple a little. Oh ouch, I am sorry. She also understood what happened. He wanted to fill his stomach as soon as possible. Kushina just sighed in contentment and then looked around. Oh, the barrier, she thought. She slowly stood up, her stomach growled in hunger. How long has it been since she had eaten anything? More than 24 hours. She deactivated the barrier and noticed the fire. Who is there? Kushina shouted, narrowing her eyes. Hana and Tsume heard Kushina and came rushing to her. Kushina, are you alright? Tsume asked in worry as she stopped in front of Kushina and started to check for any possible wounds. Kushina looked at Tsume for several seconds and then startled when Tsume hugged her and started to cry on her shoulder, muttering I am sorry again and again. Kushina sighed and put her free hand on Tsume's shoulder to calm her down. After Tsume calmed down, they looked at each other. Kushina, if I had known about it I wouldn't have let it happen, Tsume said in a cracking voice. Kushina scoffed at Tsume. You couldn't have done anything because the whole village was against me, and you couldn't have fought the whole village. Could you face it? No one could have done anything, Kushina said, and looked at Naruto who was desperately busy filling his stomach. Tsume couldn't say anything after hearing her. Kushina was right, she couldn't have done anything except making the whole village an enemy of her and her clan. She looked down in distress, but looked up when Kushina put a hand on her shoulder. But I am happy that you were not there, Kushina said, smiling that made Tsume confused, but after some moments she understood, and her eyes widened and welled up. Who was there? Tsume asked on the verge of crying. Kushina looked in the distance above Tsume's shoulder. Everyone I can think of except a few, even my friends like Mikoto, Hiashi, and Fugaku, and many more, Kushina said, and looked at Tsume. Tsume clenched her fists so tight that her knuckles became white, but don't worry, they would get what they deserve, Kushina said. Tsume then calmed down and smiled. Okay, Kushina, come with me, and you should take a bath, eat something, and rest. You can stay in my house as long as you want, Tsume offered, smiling. Kushina smiled hearing her, and looked at her. Tsume, I am glad to hear that, but you need to understand that right now I don't trust anyone, especially my friends, but don't worry, you are not in them. But still, after what happened, it's hard for me to trust anyone, and if I stay with you, it will endanger you too, Kushina said grimly. Tsume's eyes widened hearing it, but she tried to say, but Kushina cut her off. Tsume, you are still my friend, just give me some time. Okay, Kushina said softly, and Tsume nodded. Tsume could understand where Kushina was coming from. Kushina then adjusted Naruto in her arms. Okay, then I shall take my leave, she said, and started to move, but Tsume stopped her. What are you going to do now? Tsume asked. Kushina stopped and looked at the sky, then she looked at Tsume, and a grin formed on her face showing her white teeth. Right now I am going to eat, take a long shower, and then sleep, she said, and went to her home. Tsume smiled hearing Kushina in her usual tone, and also went to her own home. Kushina made her way back to Uzumaki residence. As she reached the Uzumaki residence, she saw several people throwing stuff to her home, but they were all being blocked by the barrier seal around the house, and just as those people saw her they dispersed in fear. She entered the house, and the first thing she did was prepare some instant ramen. She knew it wasn't healthy, but she would worry about it later. She was starving now. After stuffing 3 bowls of instant ramen, she stopped eating and sat down on the couch. She looked at Naruto and giggled when she saw him still drinking her milk. How long are you going to drink it? Ha, let's go and take a bath, she said, and separated Naruto from her breast with a whimper from Naruto and laid him on the couch. She stretched on the couch to relieve her body from any tension. She then stood up and removed her clothes, whatever remained of them. There was no one in the house, so she didn't care. First, with a wet towel she wiped Naruto's body clean and wore him new clean clothes. She then lay him in a crib and took him to the bathroom with her so that he could be in front of her eyes all the time when she takes her bath. She sat in the hot water and cleaned her body all over, off of any blood stains. Then she relaxed her head at the edge of the tub and looked at the ceiling. It was a long day. Now what should I do? I can't stay in this hellhole, but I can't leave right now. If I leave right now, then I will leave several things unfinished like Hiruzen, Danzo, and several others that could create problems in the future, she thought, and took a brief glance at Naruto. Well, for the time being I will stay in the Uzumaki shrine and train Naruto there and see if there is anything related to Uzumakas. I remember the time when Dad had told me that this shrine has a mask used to summon Shinigami. The shrine is not that famous, so I don't think many people know about it. I will think about it later. And when Naruto gets a little older, we will head for Yuzashiogakur. But I can't be careless just now. They're still alive, and I will have to do something about them, she thought, and decided to get out of the tub. After half an hour she came out of the tub and dried her body and donned a white pajama and a loose white shirt and took Naruto lay down on the bed. She unbuttoned her shirt, put her nipple back in Naruto's mouth, and faded to dreamland. Kushina woke up the next morning. She took a look at her only lifeline and smiled. She kissed his forehead and went to freshen up. She made a proper breakfast for herself, and with Naruto in her lap, she sat on the couch. As she finished her breakfast, Kushina heard someone shouting her name outside. She stood up and went outside and saw Anko standing there waiting for the seal to be deactivated. Kushina let her enter the house, and they both went inside and sat on the couch. Anko was off. She was 10 years old with purple hair and 4.9 feet of height. She was strong despite her age, and had a well-developed body than any other girl of her age. At the age of 8 years old she was chosen by San Orochimaru as an apprentice, and went with him on a training trip, abandoning his academy in the middle. Hokage prompted her to be a genin before all students on the behalf of Orochimaru's recommendation, and also because she knew everything she needed to know as a genin. She was a prodigy. After that Orochimaru took her on a training trip, and then after 2 years he betrayed her and left her to die. When she returned to the village, Kushina was the only one in the whole village who didn't turn on her. So she respected and trusted Kushina with her soul, and more than anything or anyone. Anko was silent, and from her body language Kushina could tell she was feeling somewhat nervous. Kushina kept looking at Anko, making it harder for Anko to say anything. Kushina then smiled, and made Anko confused, since just a second before she was staring at her with suspicion, and the next second she was smiling. Anko, Kushina called her abruptly. Yes, Anko stammered. Do you know what happened when you were on your mission? Kushina asked. Anko's eyes met with Kushina's, and seeing the smile on Uzumaki woman's face, Anko's nervousness disappeared. Yes, I heard from Hokage-sama about what happened, Anko said. What did he say to you? Kushina asked. He said that you went berserk and killed many shinobi and civilians. Anko told her what Hokage had told her. Kushina smiled and looked at Naruto, lovingly caressing his whiskered cheeks, which made him smile. Do you believe him? Kushina asked without looking at her. Kushina-sama, as much as I know you, you can't do this, and if you have done this, then there must be one hell of a valid reason behind it, Anko said, making Kushina look at her. Kushina looked at her smiling. Thank you, Anko, for believing in me, Kushina said, and Anko just smiled. Kushina-sama, might I know the reason behind it? Anko asked, a little apprehensive. Yeah, why not? Kushina said, and started to tell her the whole story. After Kushina finished her story, Anko had her fist clenching, and her nails digging in her palm, resulting in bleeding. She had slight tears in her eyes. Kushina-sama, Anko started, but Kushina beat her to it. Don't apologize for it because it was out of your hands, and you were not here, and even if you were here you couldn't have done anything, Kushina said, and Anko looked down. What are you planning to do now? Anko asked, lifting her head. Kushina looked at Naruto, who was sleeping in her lap peacefully, and closed her eyes. After what happened I want to see what would be Hiruzen's next step, and I know, till evening he would do something nasty again. And after finishing this matter with Hiruzen, I would go and live in Uzumaki Shrine for a while until Naruto gets a little older, and while living there I want to teach Naruto and everything I know, and if he awakens something like me due to, then I will also have to keep an eye out for it. And I also have to talk to Kyuubi. Well, after that I would leave for Uzashigakure. There is something I want to find out about the massacre that had taken place in Uzu decades ago, Kushina said, and looked at Anko. Anko was a little surprised that Kushina told her all of her plans. Kushina-sama, might I ask you why you are trusting me so much? Anko asked a question she had wanted to ask for a while now. Kushina smiled, because like me you know how it feels when the person we have so much trust and hopes to betrays us, Kushina said, and Anko couldn't say anything except agreeing with her. Anko then looked at Naruto. Is he? Anko asked, trailing off. Kushina smiled. Yes, he is my baby, my son, my everything, Kushina said, and looked at Anko. Want to hold him? Kushina asked. No, it's fine, Anko said, but Kushina stretched her arms outward for Anko to hold Naruto. Anko then slowly brought her arms under the bundle with utmost care. She felt afraid that her touch might hurt him. He looked so cute and so delicate. She couldn't hold herself from kissing his forehead. You're the third person to hold Naruto after me, and Minato, Kushina said, and Anko nodded in acknowledgement. I feel honored, Anko said, and gave Naruto back to Kushina. Hiruzen was sitting on a chair in his home, thinking. He needed to kill Kushina as soon as possible, and if he failed to kill her then at least he would make her useful for Konoha by incapacitating her, and he was ready to do anything for it. He is called Anbu. Send for Jiraiya to return as soon as possible, Hiruzen said, and the Anbu shunshined. Let's see what Jiraiya is capable of, and if he alone isn't enough then Danzo and me would help Jiraiya in killing Kushina, he thought, and smirked. He is a master. If he becomes able to seal her memories or seal her powers, then we will involve her in Kra, he smirked evilly. At Uzumaki residence, it was afternoon time, and Kushina had still not recovered her natural strength from blood loss and childbirth, so she was feeling weak, but she was still strong enough to take Danzo head on. Kushina was sleeping on her bed while Naruto was nursing her breasts. She was surprised to see that Naruto needed to drink her milk at least 15 hours in 24, so she also needed to eat more and healthy food if she wanted to keep generating milk in her breasts for her baby. Anko was sitting beside the bed on a chair reading a book. Kushina had complied with Anko's request to live with her in Uzumaki residence for a little while. 1 week later, Jiraiya arrived in Konoha. He went straight to his senses. Ah, Jiraiya, I was waiting for you, Hiruzen said, and offered Jiraiya a seat. Sensei, is it true that Minato died, and Naruto is the new Jinchuriki of Kyuubi? Jiraiya asked, as he sat down on the seat across Hiruzen, and when Hiruzen nodded his world fell apart. Minato was like a son to him, and he died, and his son Naruto was the new Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. What happened to Kushina? She was like a daughter-in-law to him. Sensei, what happened to Kushina? Is she alive? Jiraiya asked, hoping it to be true. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed when he heard the softness in Jiraiya's voice while mentioning Kushina. Jiraiya, Kushina are alive, but Hiruzen said so, and trailed off. But what, Sensei? Jiraiya asked, getting impatient. Well, after Minato died, we don't know what happened. She went berserk, and turned into a beast, and killed many shinobis, and civilians alike, and destroyed Konoha more than Kyuubi, Hiruzen said, making Jiraiya's eyes whiten. Kushina killed so many people. She went berserk because of Minato's death, but Kushina is a strong-willed woman, she is not a weak-minded woman. But it may be possible that she couldn't take both Minato's death, and the fact that it was sealed in Naruto. Still killing so many people of Konoha, and destroying Konoha more than, she must have controlled herself. Daughter-in-law not, village would always be first, Jiraiya thought, and obviously he trusted his sensei more than anyone. Jiraiya, it's true, here's impressed. I trust you, sensei, but it's hard to believe that a woman like Kushina will lose control, and do that despicable act, Jiraiya said, and the fact that he should talk to Kushina about this slipped from his mind. What are you planning to do now, sensei? Jiraiya asked, now trusting his sensei completely. Hiruzen smirked, we will have to incapacitate or kill Kushina because we don't know when she will go berserk again, and we will have to secure Naruto in our hands, and you are the only one who can do it. And we don't want any more casualties, Hiruzen said, and Jiraiya nodded, but killing Kushina seemed a little too much, since he had considered her his daughter-in-law. Incapacitating her would be a good idea. Alright, sensei, we would incapacitate her, Jiraiya said, and they started to make plans. In the Uchiha household, Mikoto Uchiha hadn't stopped crying since the incident with Kushina. She hated herself for betraying her best friend. Fugaku had said to her that their son Sasuke might be in danger if she didn't do what was asked of her. And now she regrets that decision. Kushina would have wanted to kill her, and why would she not? After all, she betrayed Kushina in the worst way possible. It wasn't like she didn't resist, but she was helpless against her child's safety. She knew if she were to go to Kushina now, she would definitely kill her. What she should do now? She got off the bed she was crying into when she heard the cry of her son Sasuke. Sasuke, for whom she betrayed her best friend. She lifted Sasuke from the crib, and hugged him to her bosom, and cooed. Itachi had been sent on a long mission by the Hokage. If he had been here, she wouldn't have gone through this, and betrayed her friend because he always supported, and helped her in any way possible. Mikoto felt suffocation in the room, in that building, so she decided to go out for a walk. She decided that she would go to Kushina with Itachi when he returns, and beg for forgiveness. It was evening, Kushina with Naruto in her arms, and Anko were sitting in the living room sipping tea, and munching on some chips. Kushina looked at Anko. Anko, you will have to go, and live in your apartment, Kushina said while caressing Naruto's hair. Why did I do something to offend you? Anko asked in panic. Kushina smiled, no Anko, you never did anything to offend me. If you live with me, your life might be in danger. I know how everyone treats you, but we will have to do it. Hokage doesn't know that you are with me, so you will be safe there, and it's not like you can't come here. You can come here anytime you want, Kushina said, and Anko's eyes welled up. She stood up, and hugged Kushina, and Kushina returned the hug. Okay, Anko said, and went to gather her belongings. When Anko went to her apartment, Kushina sat on her bed with Naruto sleeping beside her. She looked at the ceiling, so Jiraiya came. What is a possibility that he would betray me? 100% she thought, and then a demonic smirk formed on her beautiful and angelic face. After her transformation, she had become more beautiful, and her facial features became more attractive and luscious, her red lips became more delicious. Her body had become more voluptuous, and her breasts, even though her breasts were producing milk for her baby, were firmer, and gravity didn't have any effect on her boobs, and they became larger than teacups. Her skin had a lush glow in it. Overall, any man would ruin their underwear, just from the look of her. Well, where should I start? Hiruzen or that asshole Obito? She muttered, then her eyes turned to Naruto's sleeping form. Well, I guess I should start from Hiruzen and Danzo. I can't be careless even for a minute. I need to stay alert at every moment, she thought. She sighed, she can't stay alert for potential dangers if Naruto took her full attention. It's impossible for me to relax in this disgusting village, she said to herself, and then an idea came to her. She would make a special blood clone with several modifications of her own, and that clone would do everything for her, which could have only been done by separating Naruto from herself, and that clone would take care of the danger alert issues, and tell her something is wrong. And then without worry she would train Naruto in everything that she could. She couldn't stop herself from smiling widely and lovingly at her son. She kissed his forehead, and faded off into a sleep with her baby boy in her arms. Next day, Kushina made a blood clone with several modifications just as she wanted. This blood clone was made using 5 elements which were the main constituents of every living being's body. She had put several seals on her clone. When to transfer information from her clone to herself every day, the second seal was like an on and off switch, and only she knew where it was. Using these features, Kushina could make her sleep and work whenever she wanted. The clone would not dispel even if it gets severely wounded. It would die like a normal human. Only Kushina could dispel it if she wanted. She ordered the clone to behave like she was originally Kushina, so that the clone could go out and keep an eye on everyone, and also will do every housework, while Kushina will concentrate on Naruto. The Uzumaki residence had a large forest-like establishment behind the house. It was separated from the house with a large glass wall. The forest had 10-foot-high fencing around it, separating it from remaining land. The Uzumaki forest had an onsen and a pool for swimming and other purposes. Kushina looked at the scene and sighed. She will have to leave this amazing place. Why don't I teleport it to Uzumaki Shrine, she thought, and smirked. Now she only has to wait till evening. If Hiruzen made any move, then she would kill him, and if not, then tomorrow she would kill him herself. Suddenly she sensed Jiraiya's chakra nearby, and after 1 minute her doorbell rang. She looked at her clone. I am going to the bedroom. It will be your first test. The things you need to remember are, don't trust anyone, and be careful of Jiraiya. He might have betrayed us already, Kushina instructed her clone, and went upstairs to the bedroom. The clone Kushina went to open the door. Clone opened the door, and saw that Jiraiya was standing there with flowers in his hands with a stupid grin on his face. He made a gesture to hug Kushina, but she stopped him with her palm touching his chest. You have come after a long time, Kushina asked without any emotion on her face. Well, I was busy with my research. Anyway, are you going to invite me inside or will you keep me standing here? Jiraiya said, trying to take a look inside. Kushina then ushered him inside, and to the couch. Jiraiya's features then became somber, so, Minato, he trailed off. Yeah, he died, Kushina said, looking to the side. Though he knew how it happened from Hiruzen, he thought of asking Kushina. How did Minato die? Jiraiya asked, and inspected Kushina's body language closely. Kushina sighed sadly. He summoned Shinigami, and sealed the Kyuubi in Naruto, and she trailed off, faking like she couldn't say it. She was smirking inside seeing Jiraiya's shocked face. She knew what he was doing. Jiraiya was confused. Originally he had thought that Kushina would at least become angry when he mentions Minato's death. But she was calm, and took it well. Then it clicked in his mind, she was mentally sick. He felt an ounce of sadness, but his mind became clear when the question of Konoha's safety invaded his mind, and his will hardened to do what was necessary. I wanted to see him with his son growing up, Jiraiya said looking down. Kushina sighed again, but didn't say anything. Jiraiya looked at Kushina. He needed to send Kushina somewhere if he wanted to put some spying and chakra restriction seals there. Where's Naruto? I want to see my godson, Jiraiya said, smiling sadly. Yeah, it might work. Kushina would go to bring Naruto, and that would give me a chance, he thought. Kushina mirrored Jiraiya's sad smile, and nodded, but instead of going herself, Kushina's under-testing clone made another clone, and sent the clone to fetch Naruto. Jiraiya cursed Kushina inwardly. His little plan failed. The clone entered the bedroom, and told the original Kushina everything. Kushina nodded. Okay, I will go in place of you. Jiraiya would never be able to sense that there are other Kushinas too in this home, because this room is filled with several suppressing and chakra-resistant seals against any outer element, be it a human or their senses, Kushina said to her clone, and lifting Naruto in her arms went downstairs. Jiraiya stood up, as he saw the baby in Kushina's hands. Kushina adjusted Naruto in her arms in a way that Jiraiya could look at Naruto's full features. Jiraiya's eyes glistened when he saw Naruto's sleeping form. He moved towards Kushina to hold Naruto, but, as he stretched his arms towards Naruto, Kushina turned to the side. I am sorry, Jiraiya-sensei, but I had just made Naruto sleep, so I don't want him to wake up, Kushina said, turning towards Jiraiya again. Jiraiya's eyes widened. He could clearly see that Kushina didn't want him to hold Naruto. Did she realize what he was planning? He stood straight, his posture changed, and seeing this Kushina's senses became alarmed. Then the clone Kushina interjected. You, take Naruto back to the room, she said, and original Kushina nodded, and started to move, but suddenly, Kushina's senses started to feel several chakra signatures outside of the house. She knew they wouldn't be able to enter the house because of the barrier, but Jiraiya was in front of her, and he was a prodigy. Kushina guessed that if they succeeded in breaking the barrier then, it would be because of Jiraiya. Either he had done something or he had some plan to make the oncoming intruders enter easy. Suddenly it clicked in her mind, widening her eyes. Shit, she cursed inwardly. Minato and Kushina had made the barrier together, and though Kushina was a master, and she had said to Minato not to take advice from anyone, but still Minato went and asked Jiraiya, and that advice in the past could have worked as a loophole in the barrier race. She immediately shined to the bedroom, and put several seals in a matter of seconds to stop any infiltration in the room. She changed her clothes, and wore her ninja dress, and filled her pockets with necessary weapons. She also took several trilong kunais that she could use in her ration. She wrapped Naruto in a large cloth, and tied him to her bosom in a way that it would not affect her fighting, and if Naruto felt hungry, it would be easy to feed him. She made a hand seal, and teleported. Downstairs the clone Kushina was looking at Jiraiya. Jiraiya, she trailed off. Jiraiya looked at Kushina. Kushina, if you cooperate, I promise you that you will be safe, and I will ask Sensei to alter your punishment, and hand Naruto over to us, Jiraiya said, and narrowed his eyes when Kushina started to chuckle. Why are you chuckling? Jiraiya asked, confused. Jiraiya, did you really think I would surrender, and why should I surrender? It's this Konoha that's at fault here, and I will not tolerate anyone who tries to separate Naruto from me, Kushina said, and pulled out a kunai from now on. You think you can take all of us, me, Sensei, Hiashi, and Fugaku? Kushina sighed. Well, I can try, and it's not like they can break the barrier, she said, and waited for the answer. Jiraiya smirked. Well, you're in for a big surprise if you think that they can't cross the barrier. You don't know, but Minato took advice from me in almost everything. I just hope that he would come to me for advice about what to do for your first night, as husband and wife. Well, anyway, only you and I are here, Jiraiya said, and pulled the kunai. Well, let's start then. What are we waiting for? Clone, Kushina said, and took the stance. And the next moment the front wall of Uzumaki's residence exploded, revealing 3 figures, Hiruzen, Hiashi, and Fugaku. Kushina noticed that they were in their battle suits. Kushina glared at the 3 new arrivals with fire in her eyes. Kushina promised to herself that if not all of them, then 1 or 2 of them would die from her hands today. Her golden chains emerged from her back, and hovering in the air, pointed them towards all of them like a spider net. The clone Kushina closed her eyes. Her priority target was Hiruzen, then others. Jiraiya threw his kunai at Kushina, and Kushina swatted it away like a fly using her chain. She still hadn't opened her eyes. She smirked wide, and like before, she stretched her right hand outward, and using her index finger, motioned them to attack. Bring it on, she said in a deep and low voice. The group of 4 then charged their respective attacks. Hiruzen summoned Enma, and the monkey transformed into a staff. Fugaku activated his Sharingan, and started to prepare his most powerful Genjutsu. Hiashi also activated his. Jiraiya activated his Sage mode, but, as he tried to move, his body paralyzed, his chakra flow in his body stopped, but not enough to let him die. He fell down on the floor. Hiruzen looked at Jiraiya with wide eyes, and then looked at Kushina with fury. What the hell did you do to him, you bitch, Hiruzen shouted. Kushina heard the insult, but didn't say anything, and next moment Hiruzen blocked an adamantine golden chain in the nick of time, and saved his head from piercing. Hiashi rushed towards Kushina, and Kushina sent 4 chains towards him, and engaged him in a fierce taijutsu battle with his chains, and those were chains, so most of his techniques didn't work, and it was impossible for him to break the thick chains, though if he used his most powerful attack, then he might be able to destroy her chains, but only if she gave him time to do so. He continued to struggle against the chains. Hiruzen saw Hiashi, and nodded to himself. Fugaku was still busy preparing. Hiruzen then made a hand seal, and shot several flame bullets at Kushina, but she blocked all the flame bullets. Hiruzen then rushed towards Kushina with his staff, and when he reached close to Kushina he jumped, and brought his staff from up to down on her head, but Kushina blocked his staff with her chain, and punched Hiruzen in the face, which sent him flying back, but when Hiruzen was in the air, Kushina wrapped her chain in his ankle, and with force smashed his body in the ground, shattering the floor. Hiruzen coughed blood. Kushina then lifted Hiruzen, and swung him in the air, and with his body, she hit Hiashi, who was still idiotically struggling with several of her chains. Hiashi and Hiruzen both went hurtling into a wall, and the force of impact made a crater in the wall, and cracked the whole wall. Come on, Hiruzen, is this your best shot, and you call yourself Hokage? It would be better if I took your position, Kushina said to Hiruzen, who was lying on the ground under Hiashi. Both of them were bleeding from their heads. Kushina then looked towards Fugaku. Using one of her chains she hit him on the side of his head, and sent him spinning in the ground. Then she noticed Hiruzen and Hiashi standing up. They both looked at each other, and nodded, and both rushed toward Kushina with blinding speeds 10 times more than before, and they caught Kushina off guard. Hiruzen's staff hit Kushina flat in the stomach, and sent her several feet in the air. While in the air Hiashi was waiting for her, and he hit Kushina's clone with his gentle fist, and sent her downward in the ground, shattering the tiles, and making a large crater in Uzumaki Residence's living room's floor. Then Hiruzen shouted, "Fire release." Fire dragon head, both of his hands stretched outwards, and a large dragon head shot out from his palms, and went soaring in the crater Kushina was in, and exploded in the crater, making the living room fill with the fire, heat, and smoke. As the fire was about to dissipate, Fugaku shouted, "Fire release." Great fireball, and threw it in the crater, making the dissipating fire explode again in a fierce explosion. Hiruzen, Hiashi, and Fugaku waited for the fire to dissipate again, but before the fire could dissipate again, 3 red chains, lava dripping from them, shot from the fire, and pierced Fugaku's leg, Hiashi's shoulder, and Hiruzen, at the last moment, was able to dodge it, but still the chain left a large gash on his arm. The Kushina wrapped in chains came out of the fire. Her clothes had burned, and chains were the only part that turned into the part of her other transformation. A dangerous look on her face, and her violet eyes were shining, making them more demonic. Hiruzen then made a hand sign, and a swamp appeared where Kushina was standing, and Kushina started to sink in the ground. Hiruzen then made another hand sign, and the swamp froze, making Kushina immobile. Hiruzen ran forward with his highest speed in an attempt to take advantage of her condition and catch her off guard again. Hiruzen disappeared and appeared in front of Kushina and swung his staff to break Kushina's legs, but as the staff was about to connect her legs, a chain blocked the path of the staff, stopping its velocity. Kushina used her lava-dripping chains to broke the frozen swamp, and using her chains as a support came out of the ground and landed on solid ground, but as she landed, she found herself face to face with Hiashi, who then hit her with gentle fist and blocked her chakra pathway system, but not enough to kill her. Then Hiashi used his 8 trigrams vacuum palm and sent Kushina's clone in the wall, but the attack had so much force that the wall couldn't stop her trajectory and shattered, and Kushina went through several walls before stopping to a halt. Kushina was outside now, her chains had disappeared, and she lay there motionless, all bloodied and battered. After some moments she opened her eyes and saw that her 3 opponents were standing, towering over her, but as she tried to stood up, Fugaku put his foot her chest, forcing her down. Then next moment Fugaku's face was inches away from Kushina's, and Kushina's clone's eyes whitened when she saw the red eyes of Fugaku, showing that his Mangekyo Sharingan was activated. His eyes looked intensely in hers, and captured her in a painful genjutsu. HMPH not so strong now, hun, where did your strength go now, you whore? Now stay in my genjutsu, and see your son dying again, and again Fugaku said, and put more force on his foot, and for a second he noticed how large her breasts were, but next second he shook his head. He turned to Hokage and Hiashi, who were still panting. Now, the fight is over, Hokage-sama, Fugaku said, and looked at Kushina again. There was a time when Fugaku lusted over Kushina, but she loved Minato. He had thought that she was a lone Uzumaki. He had sometimes insinuated his feelings, but she, being the blockhead she was, always beat him, and he ended up in hospital. Now was a chance for him. He looked at Hokage-sama. You can have her son, but I am the one who defeated her, so I would keep her for a while, and when I am done, you can do whatever you want with her, Fugaku said, and Hiruzen nodded. Fugaku then laughed insanely, but they didn't realize the impending doom coming towards them with a sonic speed. In the genjutsu, Kushina had tears pouring out of her like a river, and she had a horror-struck look on her face, and she didn't have any shred of clothes on her. In front of her was her son Naruto on the ground, and near him were Hiruzen, Fugaku, Hiashi. They all were stabbing and kicking Naruto continuously, with insane and crazy smirks on their faces, and laughing sickly. Kushina's clone thrashed against the chain she was bound to. She was helpless, and with every stab in her son, she was feeling like someone was crushing her heart with their fingers, and the crying of her baby boy was just making her desperately wish to die. Then suddenly she saw a light shining from behind the horrible scene, and the scene faded from her sight. Then the light engulfed everything. The clone Kushina opened her eyes, only to see original Kushina looking at her, and tears started to stream down again from the clone Kushina's eyes. Earlier, when Kushina teleported, the original Kushina had teleported to Anko's apartment, startling her from her sudden appearance. Anko would have said something funny, but when she saw the serious face of Kushina, she also became serious. What happened, Kushina-sama? Anko asked with worry etching in her voice. Kushina put a hand on Anko's shoulder. Anko, Hiruzen with Fugaku, Hiashi, and Jiraiya have attacked the Uzumaki residence, and my clone is fighting with them right now, Kushina said, and Anko's eyes widened. Then let's go and fight them, Anko said with a little something akin to fear. After all, they were against the Hokage and 2 powerful clan leaders. Kushina looked at Anko. I want you to think one more time before taking this step, because it will change your life upside down. Your life would be in danger at every moment, so think before making any haste, Kushina said to Anko. She didn't want Anko to regret later because of any hastily made decisions. Anko closed her eyes, then opened. Kushina-sama, the moment when everyone scorned me, but you, I decided at that moment that I would die for you if you asked me to, because you gave me the light in the darkness, Anko said with her heart. Kushina smiled, and closed her eyes, and shook her head. Okay, I want you to take Naruto to Uzumaki Shrine near the village, and stay there until Anko is off, but I don't know the way. I never went there or in that direction, Anko said, and looked down ashamedly. Kushina sighed. Okay, come with me, Kushina said, and grabbed Anko's hand, and before Anko could say anything, Kushina teleported them outside the village. Then Kushina and Anko ran towards the shrine. There was no teleport seal near the shrine, so they had to run. Kushina took a look at Naruto, and she shook her head again. Naruto was nursing on her breasts the whole time. They reached the Uzumaki Shrine in 10 minutes. The shrine was simple, just like any other typical shrine. It had a gate with an Uzumaki symbol inscribed at the top. But it was on the verge of collapsing. Kushina and Anko entered the shrine. Kushina didn't stop for anything. She went straight for the deepest room in the shrine, and when she reached there, she entered the room. The room was normal, a simple small bed, a table, and a chair with a bookcase near the table. Kushina looked at Anko. Stay here with Naruto until I return, and if someone comes, then kill them, and protect Naruto at any cost, Kushina said, and Anko nodded, but Kushina kept staring in Anko's eyes, making her uncomfortable. Anko, I am handing you my one and only life in your hands. Don't lose it, Kushina said, and Anko nodded with determination. I will die before let anything happen to Naruto, Anko said, and Kushina shook her head. Idiot, don't die, okay, Kushina said, and Anko's eyes whitened, and because of sheer emotions, she couldn't say anything, just nodded furiously. Kushina unfastened the piece of cloth which was holding Naruto to her bosom. Then she looked at Naruto, suckling his breast milk. She smiled, and slowly separated him from her breast, and covered it. Naruto whimpered, but Kushina cooed, and calmed him down. Kushina looked at Naruto, and smiled. Naruto, mama has to go, and punish some bad guys who tried to kill your mama. But don't worry, I will be back soon, before you get hungry again. You will be with your big sis Anko, okay, so be a good boy, Kushina said to Naruto, and the baby Naruto just smiled, and motioned his hands in the air. Kushina smiled warmly, and kissed his forehead, and both cheeks. For a second she thought to take Naruto with her, but reluctantly she stretched her arms outward, and handed Naruto to Anko. Anko then nodded to Kushina, and Kushina to Anko. Don't go out of this room, okay? I will put some seals in this room so no one would be able to sense your chakras. This would probably be my final fight with Konoha. I have brought Naruto here because there's a risk that Hiruzen's Anubis may attack my baby. Will I fight those four? Kushina said to Anko, who nodded. Kushina then turned and left, and teleported to a mark in front of the Uzumaki residence. She had made several modifications in the original Hiraishin to teleport to longer distances, and faster than before, and at the cost of minimal chakra. She hadn't even told Minato about the modifications in it, because she wanted to beat him umpteenth time in a spar using it. She appeared in front of her house, and her eyes whitened when she saw half-collapsed Uzumaki residence. She gritted her teeth in unbridled rage, and her eyes turned whitish with red tints in it. She wanted to teleport that house to Uzumaki's shrine, and live in it with her son. She ran towards the location, with a speed more than speed of light, tearing the wind, and making vacuum behind her, and leaving air ripples in the air. Kushina's blood boiled when she saw the sight of Fugaku's foot on her clone's breasts. She closed the distance in moments, and without stopping, gave a ferocious punch to Fugaku's face, shattering his jaw immediately, and sent him soaring through many houses, and their walls, trolleys, shops, and then half-built tower collapsing it again, and struck the monument wall, and made a large crater in the wall. He got hit in the wall so fast, and with such force that it cracked the third's face, and fell down on the ground. Fugaku went into an unconscious mode immediately. His whole body was broken. His legs, his arms, his stomach, his ribs, his lungs, his head, his jaw was hanging down. His whole body was bleeding profusely, but he was still alive, and unconscious. Kushina looked at her clone, and immediately lifted her head in her lap. She narrowed her eyes. She is in the Genjutsu, Kushina deduced, and immediately broke the Genjutsu. Clone Kushina opened her eyes gradually, and when she saw the original Kushina her eyes welled up. Kushina shook her head, and placed her hand on her clone's forehead, where she had drawn the information transfer seal, and all that happened came to Kushina, and when she saw the scene a tear trickled down her cheeks. Kushina wiped the lone tear, and looked at her clone. I should have known that your body would be weak, after so many modifications in you to make you just like a human, but you did great, Kushina said to her clone, and smiled. The clone also smiled also. So how did my testing go, boss? Did I pass? Kushina asked the clone, who smiled. You passed with good grades, Kushina said, and the clone nodded. Well, I will have to dispel you now, Kushina said, closing her eyes. Clone Kushina sighed. She had taken severe damage, and it would be a waste of time to treat her like an injured human. Kushina would just make another clone. I can understand, clone said, closing her eyes. But before I dispel you, I would like you to see what I would do now, because like me, you were also Naruto's mother even for a short time, Kushina said, and the clone nodded. Kushina stood up, and turned towards Hiruzen, and Hiashi. The civilians who were cheering after they saw clone Kushina down under Uchiha's foot were now in a panic, and started to disperse. The demonic look on Kushina's face sent chills to their bodies, and they started to tremble. Her pupil-less, and irises-less eyes looked in Hiruzen's, penetrating his soul. The red markings started to form on her cheeks, and her hairs became longer and bloodier. Hiruzen and Hiashi were trembling, but inside they were trying to calm down. It never came to their mind, and they never felt that they were fighting a clone. She was like a complete human. Suddenly another presence appeared there, as Danzo, and, as he looked at Kushina, he also became serious. Danzo's presence gave Hiruzen and Hiashi moral support, and they calmed down. Kushina was emitting a black and red aura which accentuated her features, as a demoness. Now everyone was there, every clan head, civilians, shinobis, and Mikoto with Sasuke. Red-hot chains emerged from her back, and pointed towards Danzo, Hiruzen, and Hiashi. Then an idea came to her. She wanted them to kill with her hands, so she retracted her chains, and made 2 clones, and set to handle Danzo and Hiashi. The clones turned towards Hiashi and Danzo, and several chains emerged from their backs, and went soaring to them, and engaged them in a fierce taijutsu battle. The speed of the chains was so much that Hiashi and Danzo started to have problems, and went on the defensive. Kushina nodded before turning towards Hiruzen, whose eyes were wide because he understood what was about to happen, a one-on-one battle between Hiruzen and Kushina. Kushina rushed towards Hiruzen without giving him any chance, and the speed she rushed towards Hiruzen was a sonic speed which was out of reach of any human to perceive. She punched him in the stomach and sent him hurtling back into a wall, but the wall couldn't take the force of the pressure of the hit and shattered, and Hiruzen continued his trajectory. Suddenly Kushina was above him and brought her leg downward and hit Hiruzen in the chest and sent him into the ground, making a large crater. Kushina didn't wait for him to come out. 4 water orbs appeared in front of her and shot 4 concentrated water streams at jet speed in the crater, making it deeper, and the 4 jet streams of water hit Hiruzen's legs and hands, making holes in them. He cried out in pain. She didn't wait, and a fire orb appeared in front of her, and a stream of fire shot into the crater, exploding it. After the dust cleared, Hiruzen was barely conscious. She came down in the crater, which was 5 feet deep and several meters in radius. She fell directly on Hiruzen's stomach and made him cough more blood. She then stood up and took a look at Hiruzen. He was bleeding from every part of his body. He couldn't even ask for help from Hiashi and Danzo because his windpipe was destroyed. Kushina lifted him by his neck. So how's it feeling, huh? You just showed your power to my clone. Now what happened? Show me your power. Show me, damn it, Kushina shouted in anger and smashed his body in the wall. Suddenly Kushina felt several chakra signatures behind her. She turned and saw that they were Hokage's personal Anbu. She smirked. Do you guys want something, she said, and they all rushed towards her, but, as they took one step, every one of Anbu had a red lava dripping chain in their harder head. They all fell down dead. Kushina sighed. Just a waste of time, she said, and turned to Hiruzen. A chain came out of her back and went near Hiruzen. Well, go to hell, Hiruzen, Kushina said, and pierced his chest. She lifted his pierced body by the same chain, and walked to the location everyone was, and threw his body on the ground. Hokage is dead, Kushina announced, and enjoyed the look on everyone's face. Soon, Shikaku and Chauza had their eyes whitened. Civilians started to back away in fear, and ran to their houses. Kushina then turned to her clone, who just was about to dispel, and dispelled. The moment the clone disappeared, Hiashi took a breath of relief, but next second he found a claw enclosing his neck. Then the claw clamped on his neck, and threw him in the ground face first, and suddenly she felt someone behind her, and her instincts kicked in, and she tilted her head to the side, and next moment a blade appeared on the place her head was just moments ago. Kushina immediately caught the blade in her claws, and flung the owner in front of her. It was Danzo, as he landed in front of Kushina with a chain wrapped around his neck, and started to burn the skin of his neck. Kushina looked at Hiashi, who was in her claws. She lifted his head, and slammed it in the ground again, and soon after the 4th or 5th flump his face was impossible to identify. He was already unconscious, and on the verge of dying. She lifted him, and threw him where dead Hiruzen was lying. All Hyuga clan, Uchiha clan, Inuzuka clan, Akamichi, and several other clans were there, but no one dared to say anything to Kushina. They all watched in silence. Kushina then looked at Danzo, and raised an eyebrow. Are your debtors still alive? Kushina asked, and Danzo tried to speak, but couldn't. He wanted to use replacement, but he was unable to mold any chakra, due to the immense pain caused by the burning of his neck. Kushina sighed. Let me put you out of your misery, Kushina said, and slammed him on the ground, and went to him. You know, you are the most stupid person I have ever seen after Hiruzen. I had already been a loyal ninja of Konoha, and like me, Naruto would have been too, but no, you wanted to kill me, and keep Naruto for yourself, and for your selfish reasons, and see where it has brought you. Well, go, and meet your companions in hell, Kushina said, and lodged a chain in his beating heart, killing him, and throwing him where Hiruzen was. Kushina took a look around her, and saw that everyone had a fearful look on their faces. She noticed that there were no civilians. She sighed, and went to her clone, who nodded. Kushina closed her eyes, and dispelled the clone. She looked towards the Hyuga clan members. Hisashi was standing in front of his clan members, with tears in his eyes. Kushina then teleported to where Fugaku was, and then teleported back to where everyone was. She threw Fugaku's body on the ground, and shouted, medics. Several men and women came forward. Heal this scum right now, enough to make him conscious again, she ordered, and the medics started to work out of fear. After 15 minutes intense healing, Fugaku opened his eyes, and Makoto, who was holding Sasuke, couldn't stop coming out, in front of the crowd. Kushina smirked seeing this. Wow, Makoto, I didn't expect you to be here. No, I was wrong to not expect you here. But really, I didn't think you would come in front of me again after betraying me, Kushina yelled in anger, and sent a chain towards Makoto, but Itachi appeared in front of Makoto, and Kushina stopped the chain barely. Kushina narrowed her eyes, but before she could say anything, Itachi spoke. Sorry, Kushina-sama, and Shun shined away with his mother and brother. Kushina sighed, and turned to Fugaku, who was now fully conscious. So are you ready to feel the same torture my clone went through in your? And what did you say you will give me to Hiruzen when you are finished with me? Kushina said angrily. Her eyes was now redder than before, and seeing this Fugaku's eyes whitened in shock. But you know, I am wondering, what should I make you see in the cutting your hands, legs, and other body parts, or someone from your family, like Makoto sleeping with your clansmen? Nah, I am a woman too, I have a soft heart. I wouldn't do that to any other woman. But then what would you say about Itachi hanging from the ceiling, or Sasuke's head on your dinner plate? she said, and looked at Fugaku, who had a horrible, disgusting look on his face. He had saliva and blood dripping from his open mouth. Kushina shrunk her nose in disgust. It seems that you just started to get tortured just from my creative ideas. But anyway, only one fate is awaiting you now, and that is death. Go and meet your companions in hell, Kushina said, and grabbed his head in her claws, and applied so much force that it exploded, and the blood splattered on Kushina. She threw Fugaku's headless body to the heap of other dead bodies of Hiruzen and Danzo. Then suddenly she remembered something, and her eyes widened. I forgot about Jiraiya, shit, she muttered, and Sunshine to where Jiraiya was, but didn't find anyone there. Damn it, he escaped, but how? I am sure someone must have helped him. It was impossible for him to escape that seal, she muttered to herself. There is no one left in the village that could free him, which means it must have been an outsider, she said to herself, and shrugged. She would kill him next time. She shunned back to where everyone was. She looked towards the crowd. If any of you tried to do anything against me, my son or someone I care about, then their fate would be like these scums, Kushina shouted. She looked at Hisashi she called, and he looked at her in fear. Yes, he stuttered. Kushina sighed, and her features softened. Her demonic features faded, leaving her original features. She looked at Hisashi. He was also holding his son, and his wife was standing behind him in fear. Come here, she said in a normal tone. Hisashi came to her on trembling legs. Kushina put a hand on his shoulder. Your brother is still alive. Take him to hospital, Kushina said, and look at the blue-haired child Hisashi's wife was holding. I know he has a daughter, and I wouldn't want her to be raised without her father, whereas her mother is already dead, Kushina said, and Hisashi had a greatly surprised look on his face. Well, I am not heartless. Now go before he dies, Kushina said. Hisashi nodded, and thanked Kushina before going to his brother. Kushina then looked around, and noticed that there were only 3 people left in the area, Tsume, and Shikaku, and Kushina herself. Tsume looked at Kushina, and smiled, then said, well, what now? You killed, and now this village is without a leader to lead it, Tsume said. Kushina sighed. Well, I don't really care about this village, and Shikaku cut her off. But I care. I don't know about anyone, but I care about the village because we are living and serving this village for a very long time now, and we were born here. I can't turn on my village, so I care, Shikaku said, and Kushina could understand his feelings. Kushina sighed umpteenth time that day, and said, well, it's in your hands what you do with the village, and started to turn to go away, but Tsume stopped her. Where are you going? She asked. My son, Kushina replied. She couldn't wait to hold her son to her bosom, and she chuckled when a thought came to her mind that just as she would take him in her arms to her bosom, he will start nursing her breasts again. She shook her head smiling, and teleported to Uzumaki's shrine. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. And make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.